I just want to take this opportunity and welcome everyone to tonight's session. I mean, it's a Friday month end. Everyone got paid. So I'm assuming we're all out there doing all, catching up with live and also like reaping the rewards of our hard work. But nonetheless, we will continue with this because I think it's a session that we've long waited for. And it's a continuum of what we started last year when we had a talk with Ms. Hornsby on how to write your research protocol. For those that have missed that session, we will try and make sure that we share them concurrently so that you're not lost in the loop, because I so believe that this is a continuum of that conversation. So as you all know that research has become paramount. I mean, especially in medicine, whereby for us, it's not a matter of whether you like research or not. If you want to become a specialist in South Africa, you better get with the program and just do your research, do your MA. And whether it's just a dissertation or you're going to go ahead and publish it, you need some kind of exposure or experience in it as things stands at the moment. So I think one of the things that have always been like, I don't know, a headache for many is because these protocol writing and how to navigate HREC, it's not something that you would get in a lecture hall in university or you would hear in conversations. And I think we're very privileged to have Ms. Hornsby with us to sort of educate us and help us. We will record this session. Please feel free. It's small and intimate. Feel free to ask any questions that are not clear to you. And we will record this session for those that might have missed it. And I think it's going to be of great use to us. So Ms. Hornsby, we do appreciate your time. I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to those that may not know you, and then take it ahead. Those that will join as the train goes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doc. Yeah, so just a quick, I'll try not to be too long-winded. I'm a senior scientist and a PhD candidate. So I'm based in South Africa. We're all in South Africa. I'm based in Cape Town at the South African Medical Research Council, where I'm employed as a senior scientist, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Psychiatry at Stellenbosch University. So I hope I have the necessary, background. Well, I do, but the necessary expertise to do a proper job. And it's been, years of training at university, strong research, quantitative, and then also, in my work experience, working as a scientist for the past 20 years or so. Right. So I thought about how I was going to structure this, without being too pedantic, because I really wanted it to be interactive, but unfortunately there has to be that, that instructive part to it. So as you said, the HREC, navigating that can be daunting. Right. So that's really what the purpose is of. I am going to touch or recap on certain ethical principles, but just very briefly, because that really grounds the research proposal and what needs to go into it for the ethics review process. So what we'll cover today is the HREC and its purpose, core ethical principles in human research, the key ingredients of a research protocol, and I'll interchangeably use the term protocol or proposal. These are both the same things. Then we'll go into the HREC process, because that's really the meat of today's of tonight's presentation, and I'll leave off with a few what I find are useful tips. And please, just whenever you want to interrupt me, you can do so. Right. So, what the HREC is and the purpose itself. So, as you all know, it refers to Human Research Ethics Committee, and this must be a nationally registered HREC, which all of your ethics committees, the institutional ethics committees, will be. This committee, right, is responsible for reviewing the research protocols or proposals, and it does so to ensure that the research is firstly scientifically sound, that it's ethically acceptable, and that the rights and welfare of the participants are protected. And I'm sure in your the ethics training, the GCP training, that was really the core focus of that training, the GCP training. I'm not sure if you are required to have that, but if you have not done so yet, it's a good starting point. So the committee functions include, it's a bit of a repeat, but reviewing ethical aspects of the research, ensuring that informed consent is properly obtained, and we'll speak about that in a bit, assessing the risks versus benefits of participants being involved in the research, ensuring compliance of the research with ethical guidelines and the statutory bodies. So these would include Declaration of Helsinki, the South African Good Clinical Practices, GCP, Good Clinical Laboratory Practices, SAPRA, that would be for drug trials. So if you are testing a new drug therapy, so SAPRA, as you know, is the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Let me take a step back. So there's an HREC for human research and animal research. I'm going to be focusing on human research. I'm not sure if you would be involved in animal, like mouse or rodent research, or primate research at any point, but that's it will be the same process, but it's just different ethical principles. So the compliance must be for the local context. So there's international GCP, which has been revised and updated for the South African context, because we have a very different, our context is different, so we can't apply principles universally. So that's the purpose really of the HREC, is about protecting everyone involved, but the participants, that's the main issue, or the main concern is that the participants' rights, the autonomy, all of which we'll cover in a little bit, all of these are protected, that people aren't exploited, as you would remember from GCP. There's been a very bad history associated with biomedical research, in previous decades. So then the committee also ensures that the research is ethically acceptable, as I said, and that the rights and welfare of the participants are protected. So there are other regulatory bodies as well, in addition to the HREC. I'm really speaking from Stellenbosch University, but I suppose it will be the same across institutions. So Stellenbosch University, our academic hospital is Tygerberg Hospital. So I'm sure, the application process might be a bit different, but the same principles would apply. So there is a separate parallel process to the HREC. So the HREC is concerned with the protection and welfare of participants. This Research Ethics Committee, it provides oversight of biological and environmental safety. So it's also referred to as the RECBES. And later on, I'll show you the websites and where to navigate, at least on the Stellenbosch University system. But the things that you would need to look for in preparation of applying for ethical approval and submitting a protocol. So the purpose here of this ethics committee is to provide oversight and management of biological and environmental safety in research at the institution. and it provides review and regulation of all research, of teaching, of testing activities involving recombinant DNA, biohazardous materials, so that would be biospecimens, genetically modified organisms, and nanomaterials that could potentially have a negative impact on the physical, on the biological, and the spatial environments. And as I said, this is a separate approval required from the HREC process. So this really guides the how you would go about protecting, how you would go about carrying out all of the research tasks, so blood collections, any biospecimen collections, how the environment will be managed. So there it's though that concerns environmental safety, hazardous training of the staff and how safety is ensured. So for blood spills, spills of biohazardous materials, and then also for laboratory storage of biospecimen. So even if you have HREC approval, if this approval is in place, you would still be able to continue with your study. But if you require biobanking, for example, laboratory storage, you won't be able to do that until this is in place. So remember, it's two separate processes, and you must have HREC approval before one can apply for the RECBS approval. So just very quickly again, as I said, the recap of the core ethical principles that guide all human research, because as I said earlier, this really underpins the research protocol and what needs to be detailed in that protocol. The first principle is beneficence and non-maleficence, and this refers to maximizing benefit and minimizing harm. So the researcher has an ethical obligation to maximize benefits and minimize risks. And the risks associated with participant involvement in the study must be reasonable. So anticipated risk of harm due to exposure involvement in the study must be reasonable and adequately mitigated. So these are the things that need to be described in detail. I mean, it doesn't matter how pedantic you might find it or self-explanatory. One needs to operate from the premise that, whoever the reader is knows nothing about anything. And so description of everything is important in the protocol. Equity is the second basic principle. And this refers to the balance of risks and benefits for all role players involved. So there has to be equitable distribution of risks and benefits among the individuals or participants involved in the research. And this principle really states that individuals, or can be communities or groups, should not bear any unfair or an unfair share of the burden due to participating in the research. So essentially, they shouldn't be unfairly excluded from potential benefits of research participation, and they should not be unfairly I'll get to the unfairly or the converse of that in a minute. So the population from which the research participants are recruited from must have a reasonable likelihood of benefiting from the research findings and outcomes. So for example, if there's development of new therapies or treatments or medical devices, the research population must have the same likelihood of benefiting from any product or treatment that emanates from the research. An example is ARV drug therapy that was experimented on Africans when it was first tested. Yet the drug, when it was finally at the FDA approval and it was made available, it was only available to gay white men in the US. So though it was tested on African people, they didn't have access or benefit to the drugs because of the lack of affordability of the drug at the time. So equity is a very important principle. Then there has to be respect and dignity for persons. So this refers to autonomy and self-determination. So individuals who are capable of making choices and deliberating about these choices, they must be treated with respect and dignity, and they must be able to exercise the autonomy. So, the ability to make informed decisions for themselves or about, if it's a community, making informed decisions about the community without any coercion. And where autonomy is not possible, so where the person lacks the capacity to make choices or they have diminished capacity because of, for example, mental disability or being of minor age, then a representative must make this on their behalf while protecting the best interest and well-being of the individual. So respecting the dignity, privacy, and confidentiality, well-being, and the safety of research participants are paramount. And POPIA has added an additional layer of regulations, as we all know. So the Protection of Personal Information Act provides guidance on how a participant's personal information should be processed. So that deals with, as you are aware, the storage, access, sharing, and the disposal of data, etc. And what one should really take time to define is what constitutes personal information, because POPIA is very, very specific about that. So in research, participant data is normally de-identified, but we do have databases for linking, if we need to get back to participants or if we want to, if there's a follow-up study where we need to have personal information, like ID numbers. We don't in our research typically work with ID numbers, but I'm sure in hospital, while we're in a hospital setting, ID numbers will be used, especially when the laboratory services are involved. So that would be ID numbers, names, surnames, addresses, telephone numbers, cell numbers. That there must be a clear description of storage, access control, and management of that, and disposal of that information. Then there's sorry, did I skip a? No. Oh, sorry, no. Then, so those are the core principles, just a quick recap of the core ethical principles, right? So before I get into the HREC process itself, I just want to briefly go over what needs to go into a research protocol. The first round was more from the first introductory lecture was more of a, what the research protocol looks like, what the science and the methodological issues are. But this is really, what are the key ingredients of a research protocol, and what are the things that the HREC will consider and will review the protocol on. So firstly, there must be relevance and value, right? So let me just take a step back. Your protocol and your proposal is a blueprint. So it's the plan for your research. And it's important that we show that we stick to this plan. There are instances where we need to make amendments or deviations, but it needs to be reported in a timely manner to the HREC, which I will also cover later on. So I don't want to go into that too much. We will cover it later. So with relevance and value, here you have to explain what contribution your research is making. What's it adding to the scientific knowledge? So in terms of knowledge generation and translation, how does it add to existing knowledge? How might findings be translated into products, into technology, into new treatment approaches that will improve the health of the population that's being investigated. Scientific integrity, very, very, it's paramount. So this refers to the scientific rigor. So how scientifically robust is the study design and methodology? So is your study design in a way that you are able to answer your research question? Those are the things that we addressed the first round of the first lecture. So, your research question, your research objectives. Is the study design appropriate? Is it scientifically robust? The methodology that you're following. What's the validity and reliability of the data and outcomes? That is a presentation all on its own. Validity and reliability. Those are statistical psychometric properties of the measures and tools that we use to collect our data, which means that our data is trustworthy, it's standardized, we know it's accurate, and it's measuring what it's supposed to measure. Stakeholder engagement is increase. I mean, it's not a new thing, but it's almost standard these days. Is in research is stakeholder engagement, and that is where we collaborate at an early stage, right at the beginning of the research and for the duration, of the research. And it's important, to include expertise, or people with expertise in different fields. So that could be, not really co-researchers. Co-research might be part of your research team, but they can be part of the stakeholder group, academics, community-based organizations, community representatives, or even government. And this approach increases transparency and acceptability of research. So if your research is conducted if you need to recruit from a community, for example, or a community clinic, health clinic, I suppose most of your research would be based at, you would recruit from patient folders. But if for whatever reason there's a community aspect, it's good or critical to have community engagement at that point. So that we know that what we are doing is acceptable to the people that we are trying to access. And, when I talk about co-researchers now, that's where the expertise of, like a multidisciplinary team comes in play. So you would involve a methodologist, a statistician, and it's important to involve these people right at the inception. At the inceptional planning and during the planning of the research, right up to the write-up and of the scientific peer-reviewed papers. And, it's tricky because sometimes being a methodologist and a statistician are two different things. Statistician could be a good methodologist, but not necessarily. So a statistician knows that the statistics, they will be able to do whatever statistics is required, for the data that's provided. A methodologist, on the other hand, that's the person who will tell you what study design is adequate or required to answer, as I said, the research question. What type of recruitment strategies need to be used, and the methodologist and statistician usually work closely together. So it's important to have a good team. So they'll have expertise in their different fields. So they'll be the person who has the background expertise, and then the statistician, the methodologist, laboratory technicians, and so on. Then the next ingredient or aspect of research protocol is that there has to be a fair risk benefit ratio. So yeah, the potential risk of harm to the participant must be outweighed by the benefit of participation, right? So the risk can't be more than the benefits. And benefits of research does not predicate participant exposure to unacceptable harm. So what I mean by that is that when we assess risk of harm, the magnitude and the seriousness of the harm, as well as the likelihood of this harm occurring during the study procedure and study involvement, must be thoroughly addressed. And usually drug trials carry more serious harms than other therapies, like more the psychosocial, social sciences. But any research really carries harm and must be addressed. And out of an abundance of caution, participants who may face undue risk must rather be excluded from the study, even if they may benefit. Right, so it doesn't mean if you as the researcher feels that, oh, but this person will really benefit from this, from this drug trial. The harms must be carefully weighed first, and it could be that an HREC, if there is significant harm, but there is but the benefit there's significant benefit, an HREC may actually approve inclusion of such persons only if acceptable justification is provided. And this justification must demonstrate the relevance, the importance, and the value of the research to the broader society. So harms would include things, examples would be biophysical harms, psychological harms, or moral, in the case of social sciences. Moral harm like deception, social harm like stigmatization, legal harm like economic loss or loss of income. So those are all of the things that need to be carefully thought through and need to be done right at at the planning before you even start the write-up of the protocol, is to engage with people who've worked on similar studies, and that's why engagement and collaboration is important. There has to be fair selection of participants. So recruitment, selection, inclusion, exclusion must be based on sound scientific and ethical principles. Participants cannot be excluded based on discriminatory grounds, for example, race, age, sex, sexual orientation. On the flip side of that, or conversely, persons shouldn't be targeted for inclusion based on these grounds, based on race, age, sex, and so forth. And this ensures that the research process is unbiased, that it's transparent, and that it's representative of the population under investigation. So representativeness is another scientific research principle when it comes to study design, sample selection, sample size, calculations, and so on. But as I said, that's a story for another day. Informed consent is important. So participation is voluntary and must be based on informed choice. And informed consent takes place before participants are enrolled in research. So we cannot do retrospective informed consent. And informed consent means that the person isn't just informed, but that they truly understand what the research is about and what they're letting themselves in for. And that is why ethics committees now require that the especially the informed consent forms are in a language, either in the person's first language or in a language that they understand and can speak. And so, yeah, at MRC, we usually do translations into 3 or so languages, but obviously that also depends on the funding that's appropriate, because translation and back translation is quite expensive. So then, yeah, so for the next part or the next component is ongoing respect for participants. So there has to be respectful, again, for the person's autonomy, voluntary participations, and the participants must know and understand their right to withdraw at any time during the research without negative consequences. And then research competence or expertise is important. That needs to be demonstrated to the ethics committee. So this refers to the qualifications, scientific and technical competence. So the research protocol would be accompanied by the CVs of all of the entire research team. Well, not the field workers so much, but of the principal investigators, and co-investigators, the methodologists, data manager, trial manager, and so forth. So that is the, what the essential bits that need to be covered in a research protocol. But yeah, so yeah, it's really around the ethics and a clear, so it's the scientific rigor needs to be clearly demonstrated, and you have to show that you've really done a thorough, detailed consideration of the ethical issues involved in research participation. So just quickly, a research protocol would include these components. There will be a title page. Then there's a general information page that would have information around the sponsor, the funder, the PI, the co-investigators. Then there has to be a statement of compliance, listing all compliance to all the regulatory bodies, a signature page with a PI signatures with a statement confirming compliance. Then that's followed. So that's the first bit. Then there's a summary, which is basically your abstract, a background, introduction that gives the context, empirical evidence for what you are studying. It includes study justification or rationale for doing the study and the study aims and objectives. Then the methodology. This is where the science comes in. That includes the study design, participant recruitment, study site. So where is it going to be? At the hospital, in the community, at community health clinics. The participants involved, a description of the treatment or the therapy, and then the study procedure, which is basically the step-by-step blueprint of how the study is going to be carried out. And it has to be written in such a way that it's replicable. So anyone who wants to conduct this study at a later time needs to, so it needs to be, the steps need to be succinct and clearly described, so that anyone who wants to conduct the same study is able to do so, and that the results are replicable. So someone else who does this, who conducts the same study following the same procedure, but they get different results, means something is off somewhere with the science of the original study. There has been, I think it's in chemistry or in chemistry, where there was one scientist, not in South Africa, I can't remember where, who copied and basically reproduced the study, but then got entirely different results. So research integrity is important. Then there's data analysis section. So for the methodology and the data analysis part, that's where the methodologist and statistician will be involved, or they will really be they won't do the write-up, but they will advise on that. Data analysis is your statistical analysis plan, and the statistics need to be appropriate for the study design and needs to be appropriate to answer again the research question. And that is what we refer to in the first lecture as the golden thread. So it's the research question, research aims, and the research objectives, and the analysis need to answer each of those components. Then there's the ethical consideration section, and that would cover all of the things that we discussed earlier. All source documents and access to data or documents, so description, the actual source documents, describing them, and I know in GCP we went through what source documents are, so I won't spend time on that. There has to be a data management plan, so that speaks to who has access to data, how is access going to be controlled, where the data is going to be, whether it's going to be manual or hard copy data. There are ethical regulations for storage. If it's electronic data, again, ethical regulations for storage of manual and electronic data. So electronic data has to be, for example, password encrypted, cannot be shared via email without a password, things like that. And again, describing everything in detail is important. And then these are reference lists that self-explanatory, and appendices. So appendices would refer to all the documents that you would use for data collection. So it would be informed consent forms, any other approvals that were obtained. I'm trying to think. It's your instruments, source documents, those. So the ethics committee want to see each and every document or form that's going to be used for data collection, for all the processes in the carrying out of the study. So as I said earlier, there's the research protocol, right? So that's what we discuss now. And then there's SOPs, or standard operating procedures. And this is a detailed document, and this is not separate from the research protocol, right? So the SOPs are separate to research protocol. This is a detailed document, and it's usually shorter than the protocol. It's written very succinctly. It's a detailed document that provides clear instructions for how routine tasks must be performed, so by the research team, and it describes or details the processes to ensure consistency, quality of the research, and compliance with regulatory guidelines. So it facilitates consistency and standardization. So it ensures that all research tasks are performed standardly and accurately in the same way, regardless of who conducts them. It ensures quality and reproducibility, so there has to be clear step-by-step instructions that ensures that research quality is maintained and that reproducible results are ensured. It facilitates compliance, so it aligns the research practices that's followed in your study. It aligns those with the institutional and national regulations. So your GCP, National Department of Health, etc. It simplifies training. So it provides a clear guide for new and existing staff, and it ensures that everyone involved, so all the research personnel, that they are trained correctly on the correct procedures. It's also a reference point, so it serves as a central reference document, right, that the entire research team can consult during the conducting the study. And this document must be concise, must be written in a logical, step by step, easy to read format, and it must be written by someone with a good knowledge of the task. So the HREC will want to see SOPs for all of the collections, as I said, whether it's uh, venous blood collections, hair samples, whatever needs to be, a biospecimen needs to be collected, or any data that needs to be collected, there needs to be SOPs for those. And elements of an SOP is the title page, so it includes the topic, SOP topic, effective date, and approval details. It describes the scope and applicability. So here the procedures are explained, and it also covers what the procedures or the SOPs applies to and the relevant regulations. There's a summary of the method, which is a brief overview of the procedures, detailed instructions. So this is the core of the SOP. And again, as I referred to earlier, a step-by-step logical, concise guide for carrying out research tasks. There has to be version control. So version control includes version numbers. So if there has to be updates to SOPs, if any operating procedure needs to be changed, there has to be version control. So the version number, the dates of changes or revisions, and this is to track the different versions over time, and also to ensure that the team is using the most recent version. Is that can be very dangerous if there is poor version control or the incorrect procedures are used. There's usually an approval section, not usually, there must be an approval section. That's where reviewers sign and date the approval, and they confirm the validity of the SOPs. And then all staff signatures, so that would include the research staff contact details, so the entire team, so the names, surnames, roles, responsibilities, their signatures, and also dates and signatures provided against each version if there is version changes over time. So that's the elements of the SOP. And I know it's a bit much to take in unless you see these things, but I am, after this, I'm going to quickly go into the process that's normally followed with the University of Stellenbosch. So the HREC process, step one would be to review the institutional guidelines. So go onto the website, prepare the required information and documents. So before that, even with the reviewing, it's about planning, preparing, and reading. So that takes a while, and that's why it's important to start early in the process. Yeah, so prepare the required information and documents. Then step 3 would be to complete the submission. So that normally now it's online. But I know for that's usually for student research, but for clinical trials, they require both an online and a hard copy version to be submitted to the HREC office. Then the submission, then there's the HREC review process. And then after the committee has reviewed, there's another round with feedback and revisions. And that's step 6, and then step 7 is HREC approval. But I'll go through each of these steps methodologically. And remember, retrospective protocol review and approval is not possible. So approval must be obtained prior to study commencement. And study commencement means even speaking to people who might be, well, I suppose one could get a sense of interest, but you cannot describe the study. You can't do informed consent, anything until approval is received. So I would say to err on the side of caution, not to have any contact with potential participants you might think are eligible. When I say contact, I mean, speak about the study, this is what it's about, might you be interested, rather not to do that until you have ethical approval. So with step 1 here, you review the ethics, the HREC guidelines. So you review the submission guidelines from your institution and check the HREC requirements. So submission deadlines is usually, and I'll show you now when I do the go onto the website. There's usually a calendar with meeting dates. So there's a submission date that's happens before the date that the committee meets. And if you want to make it in time, you need to. It's better to submit even before the submission deadline, but by the submission deadline at least. Then you have to look at the application formats. As I said earlier, I'm not sure about your institution, but Stellenbosch University in the Faculty of Medicine, they require for clinical trials, if it's not student research, they require both online and hard copy submissions. The online submission platform for Stellenbosch is the Infonetica. And then look at supporting documentation requirements. So any material transfer agreements, data transfer agreements, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Then step 2, this is where you prepare your required documents. So there's an ethics application form. So obviously online, you do that online, but there'll be a for the hard copy version. So this form details or outlines the research project, the objectives or methods. And again, this ethics application form, it might differ. I'm not sure if your institution would require that, but usually there is I'm sure it would, because it's quite standard across institutions. So that's the ethics application form. Then there's the research proposal, which we just spoke about. I'm not going to go through that. The informed consent and assent form. So, as you know, for minors we get assent because they're not able to provide consent. So, but it's always consent first, for minors, consent first, and then assent from the parent, or guardian, or legal guardian. And depending on the type of study that you are conducting, I know for drug trials, the ethics committee require the guardian to be a legal guardian, not just, and I know that provides some challenges because, you know, we get many situations where children live with aunt or granny, but the person isn't a legally appointed guardian. But then I would say consult the committee, you know, and consult the committee contact communications person, because they are usually very helpful when it comes to things like that, because there are ways of justifying if you need to deviate from certain regulations. As I said, there has to be sufficient justification. All recruitment materials, so this would be how you would go about recruiting participants into your study. It could include posters, flyers, advertisements. I see I've got posters twice. People are using social media more increasingly, so Instagram, X, and so forth. So that with social media, you would obviously just provide the e-version of the flyer or the advertisement of your study. Some people even, or some studies even advertise in newspapers. Then there has to be, if you have institutional approvals from other departments, you need to attach those, prepare those. That would be, for example, if you did a study where you required ethical approvals through the Department of Education, or for, I can't think of another example, but anything beyond just approval from your institution. And then all HREC forms, so any other forms that are required by the HREC if relevant. And we'll see what those are in a minute when I take you through the Stellenbosch system. Then you complete this submission. So as I said, you need to check your institution system. You create an account and you would complete all the sections. Have to make sure, and in fact it won't allow you to submit unless all sections are completed, but you have to make sure that it's the accurate information that's in the relevant sections. You would upload all your documents and complete all the required online forms and provide electronic signatures where required, and then submit the application. So you have to make sure before you submit that you review the application thoroughly. So for online, you're able to save before submitting. You're able to save, and then you have to ensure that all required documents all supporting documents are attached, forms are completed, accurately and signed, and submit the application before the deadline. So you have to keep in mind, so those as I said earlier, I showed you earlier, there's a submission deadline that has to be, and that submission deadline is before the date that the committee meets. So the committee meets, I think, every 2 weeks usually. But there's regular meetings, but you need to, depending on the timeline of your research. So when you have, so you are funded by a sponsor, you need to complete the study in a certain time frame. You need to plan accordingly so that you submit it within that, in due time. So that's, I'm not done with the process. We're going to there's still a few steps, quite a few steps. Step 5 is then, so that's your part. You've done all the documentation, you've submitted, the proposal is in, everything. Now it's the HREC review process. So yeah, at this point, the committee will review the application And they'll assess the science and the methodology of your research. They will review the ethical considerations, so all the things we spoke about earlier. They'll want to know about the risk-benefit balance, so the fair distribution, compliance of the research with ethical guidelines. And there's two levels of review. There's an expedited review. This is usually for low risk research. And then the full committee review. So the full committee review would be for high risk or complex research. So it's more than likely that your research will undergo full committee review. I have been involved in research where we've had full committee review for the first original application, and then when we needed to make minor amendments, you can request an expedited review, because an expedited review usually takes about 2 weeks, whereas full committee review will take a few weeks up to a few months, which is why planning is so important. Then at the next step, step 6, there's the feedback and revision stage. This is where the committee requests additional information, or they will make revisions to your application, so revisions on your protocol. They'll make revisions on your informed consent. They'll ask for additional information. They'll say, oh, but this form is missing. So that is the point where you provide feedback. And it's important that feedback is addressed promptly, and that you resubmit in a timely manner. And with the online project submission, right, on the platform, there, you'll have messages indicating the status of your submission. So, for example, it will say revise and resubmit. So it's important to continuously check that online portal, because the ethics office, the committee contact person, communication person, doesn't let you know, oh, you have an update, or there's a new message. It's the onus lies on the researcher to check. There might be instances where they will email to say, no. It's let me backtrack there. It's always important to email. So if there's no updates or new messages on the portal, to reach out to the communications or the committee secretary to ask, what's happening, what's going on, and they will usually also nudge the committee to ask when you can expect feedback. Then step 7 is the HREC approval. So now you're almost getting there, almost at the end of the approval process. So once the study is approved, you'll receive an ethics approval letter outlining the conditions for conducting your research. So that would include your study time frame, the date when ethics expires, and any special instructions if applicable. So, wait, before we say that, let me just go into the Stellenbosch system. So, again, prepare and reading. So this is the main page that just speaks about health research ethics, what it entails. It has the contact details for the two. In the case of Stellenbosch University, there's two HRECs, so there's Committee 1 and Committee 2, and they tell you when they meet, contact details there. Then on this page here, this is where the forms and instructions are listed. So here you'll see, for example, you can apply for exemption of application, which is very rare. A new protocol, I'll go into this just now, new protocol application, biobank database application. So here you'll see all of the the different application fields for new applications. And this is active protocol. So this is where you've had approval, your study is already being conducted, and you need to make an application for amendment. You need to report serious adverse events and so on. And then remember, your ethical compliance is a continuous thing. So there's continual review. Here you have to provide your or submit annual progress reports, and it will depend on when your ethics. So this will be listed on your or indicated on the ethics approval letter. Depends on when your ethics expires, and again, it's important to do this in a timely manner. So annual progress reports need to be submitted not on the date of expiration, but before. I'll say even well in a month in advance or so. So I'll just go into, before I go into the application process, I just want to go into the guidance for new researchers. And this gives you guidance and instructions for a new protocol application. There's also, in this case, we have an applicant manual that you can also consult. And it says here, for example, what needs to be submitted. So for health and student research, it's online only. No hard copy is required. For clinical trials, it's online and one hard copy for the full submission pack. So protocol with all of the appendices and documentation that needs to be submitted, and that this needs to be exactly the same as the online. And then it gives you a outline or a step-by-step guide for how to prepare the submission pack. So yeah, there's a cover letter required that lists all the submitted documents, a PI-generated protocol synopsis, the sponsor synopsis, that's if possible. So it's, this is like a summary, a more it's a briefer version of the synopsis. Then, of the protocol. Then there's the research protocol proper that we spoke about, consent and assent forms, recruitment materials, data collection tools, so surveys, questionnaires, materials for participants, letters of authorizations if you're using hospital, clinics, or school. It's important to have a budget. And if it's external funding, a financial contract, because the ethics committee want to see that the budget is adequate for the study, so for the study to be carried out successfully, so that you don't sit in a situation where you run halfway through and you don't have enough money. Care after your research, there has to be justification for post-trial care. I'm not going to go through all of this because I think there's one or two I need to really that I need to discuss here. But I just want to briefly go over it. So for multi-site studies, if it's I know there's one study in my unit where one of the sites is South Africa and Zimbabwe, and I can't remember the third site. So for such multi-study sites, there has to be a description of the local study site, including all available infrastructure, the roles and responsibilities of all study staff. So not for the each study site, if it's outside of the bounds of South Africa, they have their own ethics process. We just have to do for our local study sites. We spoke about recruitment, proof of insurance for participants. So that is a must for clinical trials. You have to submit a 2-page CV for each investigator, so each PI, co-investigator, research supervisors, then signed investigator declarations, proof of GCP training or any other training. In the case of the study of my PhD study, for example, we used DBS or dried blood spot sampling that we submit for phosphatidylethanol ethanol analysis. And it's fingerprint tests, but we even had to, the ethics committee wanted to, they wanted evidence that everyone involved in the collection, because there's a certain procedure for collecting these dried blood spots. They wanted certification that training was provided for that. Then there's usually investigators brochure, packages of registered comparators, then a summary of phase 3 efficacy and safety data if this is an application for an open label, an extension of the study, right? So if it's a phase 1, obviously that won't be applicable. Then this letter of approval. I'm missing something. Wait, sorry, let me go back here. This one here, and it might apply to you or not. It applied in my study for studies that where you intend to send or receive samples or data from another location. You have to have a data material transfer. So that's a data transfer agreement, which is a DTA, or material transfer agreement, MTA, or both. So material transfer is where, for example, your biospecimen samples might be sent to a laboratory elsewhere, like we did for our hair cortisol assays. So we needed to have a MTA in place for that. In the case of our DBS, our dried blood spot samples, we had to have a material transfer agreement and a data transfer agreement, because the laboratory that side sends the assay analyses back. Right. Then HREC, this payment instruction form is important. If in my case, for PhD, I didn't have to pay that, so I was exempt. But this isn't a big amount, and then any other relevant documentation. So this is really what I've already spoken about earlier, so I'm not going to go through the rest of this document. So it's important to read, everything that's required. This is for biobanking of samples and so on. Stellenbosch also has templates, so they provide templates that can be downloaded. So for the participant information leaflet and consent template, so it's available in English, in Afrikaans, English, and Xhosa. If there's any other documents or languages, you would have to pay for translations. Then the information and leaflet content templates for parents and legal guardians, and this is for specifically, this is for legal guardians. As I said, we have situations where children are in the care of guardians who are not legally appointed. Then there's the informed consent template. So we have the standard one that's for health research. Then there's a template for genetic studies. There's a template for case reports, for online surveys. So your main consent form you cannot include, so if there's a genetics component, that needs to be done separately. It can't be done on the same consent. This is at least in the case of Stellenbosch University. And then they provide the templates for the MTAs and DTAs and so on. And then this is the fees and payment instructions form. So in this year, for Stellenbosch University, there's on the side, you can see there's links for that provides the HREC review, process committee members. This, I would say, very important to look at. So this is the calendar with submission deadlines and when the meeting happens. So, for example, your submission, if you wanted to start your study in I don't know, June next year, you would have to submit by the 27th of November for the HREC meeting on the 5th of February. So you see how far in advance submission needs to be made. And then you have to give a few months. So hopefully, if you are lucky, it will take about 2-3 months or 2 months. Depending on the complexity of the study, the number of revisions required. So if you wanted or your plan was to start in March, there's no way that would happen. So again, planning is of utmost importance, and looking at the dates ahead of time and planning accordingly. I'll just quickly go into the full fees. So this looks at the fee structure, and it gives for the new application. So for pharmaceutical studies, 8,000, and you can see how the price is, the price is quite high for pharmaceuticals, because that those types of studies and drug trials are quite well sponsored. But if, as you said, it's for a master's study, so if it's for study purposes, then you might be exempt, but I can't say that with certainty, because I'm not sure what your institution regulations are. But I know for my research, I was exempt. And remember, if it's for study purposes, you only need to do online at Stellenbosch University. Again, it's the onus is on the researcher, or the person who's embarking on this, to do proper homework. And then this is the link for the electronic application process. I'm not going to click on that, because if I do, I'm going to be asked to create a new project, which I don't want to do. So that is the process followed with Stellenbosch University. As you can see, it really, it would serve one well to, before you embark or do anything, to just read and make sure you have all of the information, that you have all of the necessary documents that apply to your specific research. Let me just see, where's that? Yeah. And again, consult with the ethics office, with the secretary. They are very they're very helpful. Let me then just get back into, if there's no questions, I'll just continue with the rest of the presentation. If there's no questions on the process, we're almost there, almost at the end. No questions. All right, I'll continue then. So as I said, now you've received your approval. You may now conduct your research, but again, planning and preparation is critical. I cannot stress that enough. I apologize for the picture. I'm not saying this is representative of any of us, but it was the funniest one that I could find. So there has to be, as I said earlier, ongoing compliance and reporting. So that's the annual progress report. So you have to ensure that you comply with the HREC conditions throughout the research life cycle. Submit annual progress reports, amendments if any changes occur, and a final report when the research is complete. And if any amendments are needed, you would discuss the following with your team, obviously. Does it mean a major protocol deviation? So, for example, changes to the entire research question, that you don't want. If you change your research question, it means you change your entire research and what you're setting out to do. Does it mean changes to study objectives, design, study population? So these are major protocol deviations, and it will set you back even further in terms of time frame. That's what's important. The planning, the consultation, the collaboration, the multidisciplinary team is really important. But I'm speaking more from a bigger study. If it's for a master's, you wouldn't really need that. But I'm just thinking, if you are thinking about, pursuing this going down the line, those are good strategies to follow. And then the next one is, the next question you have to ask is whether it's minor changes, for example, updating an informed consent or revising objectives without affecting the scientific integrity or the science of your research. So for the first one, that would be a major amendment, as I said, a major amendment and a resubmit required. For the second one, that would be a minor amendment. The first one would undergo a full committee review. For the second one, you can ask for an expedited review where they can come back to you in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. So, but any protocol deviations, whether they are minor or major, must be reported to the HREC, to the committee, as soon as possible. So, in conclusion, just a few what I find are helpful tips is to plan ahead. As I said, ethics approvals can take weeks or months, so it's important to submit early. Seek guidance. Consult your institution's ethics officer for advice. They might take a day or so to get back to you because they are inundated with emails and requests, but they will get back to you. I, at work, because of all the changes and the issues with staff changes on my study that I had, I was on first name basis with the ethics officer. I had her on quick dial. Team expertise is important, so you have to include a team with relevant expertise. In the case of a master's, for example, that would be the supervisor. I don't think you need to go beyond that. But if there's any other, I don't know if it's a genetics component or something that requires knowledge or expertise beyond your field, you would need to include someone with that knowledge on the team. External expertise is also a good idea, so advisory committees, trial steering committees. But again, if it's for master study, not relevant. This is usually for big clinical trials. Then collaboration, as I said, this can reduce the burden of the human and financial human and financial burden of conducting research. Consider the risks carefully, so clearly plan and detail how you will minimize harm and risk of harm to your participants, and be thorough. When you apply for ethics approval, ensure that all forms and documents are accurate, Your protocol is, it needs to go through a thorough. It, it it's about the scientific rigor, the methodology and all of that, but also minor things like language, grammar, style. The ethics committees will, will look at things like that. So spend time on um, on just reading and making sure that it's a good piece that you're submitting, and make sure that all the documents that's required are completed, that they're signed, and that they're submitted with your application. For student research, as I said, that Stellenbosch University is an online process, and for the submission to be final, it will require the supervisor, not the supervisor, the head of department's electronic signature, but that usually happens with the head of department receiving an email, and they then do their clicks and approvals, and only then is the protocol submitted. So again, it's the responsibilities on the student or the researcher to make sure that the appropriate signatures that's required prior to submission being finalized, that appropriate all signatures are provided. Otherwise, your application, even if it's completed, it won't be submitted and it won't be received by the HREC. So that's the maze. It is a lot. It is daunting. I will not even lie and try to make it less than it is, but it is it's a daunting process. And call on people who've been through this before. I mean, people are usually are happy to help as far as they can, or not help, but at least give advice. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I will hand over back to you, Queen, if there aren't questions or you know uh, concerns about you don't know where to start. Oh, I see there is a hand.
The other question that I think I had in mind, and he also had in mind, is that if you're in some provinces, let's say in the Northern Cape, there's no sort of medical school, like in provinces where you don't have like a medical school, and there are doctors everywhere, as you know. So can someone who's in, let's say, in the Northern Cape apply to Stellenbosch HREC committee? Or is there I've heard that there's like a national HREC committee, or if you're not affiliated with any university, can you just pick a university, or you need to find out which university is within your jurisdiction? Or is there like a national health human research ethical committee that you can apply to anywhere in South Africa? And then I think
No.
also Fanetta wanted to know if there's any courses that you can do if you considering starting the process of application for HREC approval for your research.
Okay, let me address the second one because that's easy to answer. No, unfortunately, there aren't any questions. It's really about the research community and calling on the experience from other people who've been through the process. Supervisor, the people in the department. Those are usually, these people are helpful. It's just about reaching out and asking. So. But there aren't, unfortunately, any courses. You just have to, meander, not meander, but find your way and No, I shouldn't say find your way. It's asking for help. That's the main thing, is asking for guidance. Because if you need to find your own way, it's yeah, you're going to get it wrong. As to the first question, so can you just give me context? Would that be for research that's for degree purposes, or you're a doctor based in the Free State, and you are wanting to get involved in a clinical trial somewhere, but not for degree purposes?
I can give context. So basically, if you're in your master's program, that's a pretty much straightforward process.
Because you're
But right
registered.
now, yeah, because you're registered and affiliate like with a university. But
Mm,
right now, research experience is like, I don't know, the gold that we're all searching for prior to you
mm,
getting into a master's program. So most
ah,
people would want to like publish where they are before they enter the
mm,
master's program. But there are some provinces where you don't have medical school. So in terms of you applying for HREC, would you advise that if, let's say, you're in the Northern Cape, find out which universities are you affiliated with in terms of jurisdiction? Or is there like a national HREC committee that you can apply to? Or if I'm in the Northern Cape, can I apply to Stellenbosch HREC committee, even though I'm not a registered master's student there? I think that's the question.
no, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. So you would need to find for your specific jurisdiction under which you fall, and I'm not able to speak to that because but there is a national health, a national HREC. You would need to then find where you would need to apply to, that would fall under your jurisdiction. But the jurisdiction, that's an important part, because you can't be based in Free State and then, apply to, Cape Town, to a HREC in Cape Town, for example, or, what is important is collaborating, collaborating uh, with with experts and with people in the field that you're interested or that you want to pursue. So someone who's affiliated to a university, I would say, do it that way, or affiliated to a hospital, academic hospital, because those institutions have, as I said earlier, nationally registered HRECs. We've had, I think about 10, 15 years ago, there were situations where there were HRECs that weren't registered with the National Council. So that you need to check that they are. But I think now, when it comes to institutions and medical institutions and academic institutions, those HRECs will be nationally registered. Um, but yeah, I would suggest collaborating then in that in under those circumstances. I don't know if it answers your question.
Finally, you can say whether or not that answers your question, but I personally have a follow-up question with regard to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so for instance, if you're, let's say in KZN, you want to publish something in oncology. So do you mean like find like a professor if maybe you want to affiliate yourself with University of Cape Town, find a professor in or like an academic um, person in the University of Cape Town who's affiliated with the university
With the
and then sort of
university.
publish through them. So,
So
because the
you
reason why
when
I'm
when you,
asking that,
hmm,
I think the reason why I'm asking that is I mean, you hear all sorts of horror stories when it comes to research, and I think that's why it's one of the
hmm,
most laborious and daunting tasks for people.
yeah,
And there's a lot of work that goes into it that I think we underestimate. But now I think from your presentation, we can definitely see that it's very detailed, like yeah. So, but we've heard of stories whereby some people have sort of collaborated, and then on the final paper that gets published, they're not the principal investigator. So someone who's like affiliated or like a supervisor would be the principal investigator. So I don't know. We've heard such things, but I don't know, like in
Yes.
that case, what would be your advice, like practical advice on how,
Practical
like if
advice,
Canada wants to
yes.
do that, what must they do in that case to
Yes,
safeguard
yeah, yeah.
themselves from such?
Yeah. So if you do it that way, because I mean, in my experience at least, collaboration, that's how we've done it. But it also comes with its pitfalls. And I'll address that what you just explained now. But in my experience, we've had international collaborations, and I think that's what I should have that I forgot to speak to, and I'm glad it came up now, is that you need to be careful of managing the power dynamics. Because in the situation where I was in, it was, I won't mention the country, but it was European collaborators. But it was, we needed to really remind ourselves that we are the experts of our knowledge. We know our context best, and they would come and want to impose, oh no, but it's supposed to be done this way. And we know how, that it might work there in wherever, but it's not going to work. That approach is not going to work here. And so it's important to have, to have clear boundaries. So with your collaborations, there needs to be a boundaries, as I said, and clear understanding of roles. And each of us are equal partners. We come we are on an equal footing. And it's, back in the day, it was a bit, tricky, especially if you were like in my case, I wasn't the PI. So it was a bit of a tricky situation, a sticky situation. And it needed re-engagement, so we needed to have engagement afterwards, and meetings, and agreements on how we're going to do it. So even though we had that agreement at the outset, and having the signature, so on the protocol, and for the HREC, you will have the your team outline, and who does what and who's responsible for what. And people need to operate within the bounds of that agreement. So it's important, again, long story, to for us to know that we are the experts. We know our context. Don't be intimidated because, oh, they from the University of Oslo or whatever. So we need to get out of that. South collaborations, we need to look at building those. So when I say South, it's collaborations within the African, on the African continent. We have expertise that would blow your mind. We always run to Europe thinking they know best. I'm not saying that those collaborations shouldn't be sought, but African collaborations, we do have the knowledge on our continent. And also South America is, they are increasingly wanting to collaborate with South Africa. So fostering our South collaborations, that's where we need to look for, especially in the current climate as well. And in the case of the authorship, that speaks to research integrity, and that could have been reported to the committee, because that is a that means it went. I mean, it's not to say it doesn't happen, But I know in the South African Medical Research Council, for example, so we have a research integrity office. It happened a few years ago where someone else's, someone else was the principal investigator, and some of his data was used without his knowledge, and the head of the department, it's not a university, the head of the research department published, and he made a case against this HOD, and he was I can't remember, but he was suspended from, or he wasn't able to publish for a few years or something like that. So there is recourse, but it's important to not be intimidated. If you are the PI, before you publish, you need to stipulate who's going to, because remember with publication now it's first authorship and last authorship. Last authorship is actually it's very important. It almost bears more weight or weighs more compared to first authorship. But first authorship and last authorship is usually for the PIs or the person who was really the principal or the main person responsible. So it doesn't need to be the PI always. It could be the person who's doing the bulk of the writing and the analyses, but that need to be negotiated and agreed to beforehand, and you don't accept anything else. You make a ruckus, it can be reported to the institution or to the department the person is affiliated with. But I know a lot of people let it go.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately as much as it's supposed to be a community, it's also very competitive, because in research it's about publish or perish. If you don't publish, you like our key performance areas are built around publication, and so it's being on papers and being for first authorship. But we have a there's this collegiality as well. So if you have that entrenched, and you have respect for each other, that's I think those are the core, the core, the groundwork for good and healthy collaborations.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you so much. At least now we're rest assured that there's recourse should you be a victim of such, because I think as much as anywhere, corporate, wherever you work, it's competitive. Also in research, it's interestingly competitive.
Yeah.
So like, just to make sure that we fully understand. So if now I'm finally, I want to do like research, I want to collaborate. So you would find someone who's interested in that area in an institution, but also they are part of the institution, academia, and then which HREC do you apply to? Do you apply to their HREC,
Then
or
you
you still
can.
go to affiliated or not affiliated, like jurisdiction
Yeah.
HREC?
It will depend on, as I said, where the research is based. Let me just think about that a little bit, because I mean I haven't had the experience of something. I mean we've had people working in different regions, but then they would be affiliated to a university, or it would go through the Department of Health, for example. So I suppose the Department of Health would be the first regulatory the first regulatory body. If it's at a clinic, for example, would it be at a clinic or hospital, but it's not affiliated to an academic institution? Am I understanding that?
Can I jump in?
Yes,
think
please do.
for big academic hospitals, I think already they are affiliated with certain universities. Like for instance, in Cape Town, if we look at Fortescue, it's under the University of Cape Town, and Tygerberg would be under the University of Stellenbosch. So assume that in every province that should be the case. I can't be 100% sure, but I assume for big academic hospitals, there has to be a university affiliated with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, no, I think that answers our question in terms of people that are not in like within the jurisdiction of these big hospitals / hospitals that are affiliated with specific universities, like in the rural provinces. But I think it answers the question. So the process is that you can find collaborations with other universities or doctors or professors that are affiliated with a specific university, but still find HREC
In the
within the
jurisdiction,
jurisdiction and then publish in that way. Okay. Yeah, now. And then I don't know if there's any other question from the floor. You're welcome to just put your speaker up and ask away, or you can type your question.
I think for me, it's a comment from what Nancy mentioned. I'd have to agree with the international collaboration aspect from Nancy. From experience, I think not to be specific as to European or American affiliations, but I feel like they do struggle to understand South African context, and you also have to like stand your ground and try to maintain that understanding that yes, as much as you are funding the study or you are bringing the study to South Africa, there's still a level of understanding of context and risk and moral values that South Africa entails that needs to be respected and followed. So I definitely agree with that. And then in terms of collaboration within the African continent, I'd have to say the biggest issue for us is funding. And unfortunately, we are not like the European countries and like first world class countries who have enough funding to fund these studies. So that is our biggest challenge and barrier from someone who is in research, because I have multiple colleagues who want to collaborate in countries like, for instance, Ghana and them, but they're struggling with funding, and then they have to look to European countries at the end. So it's something that we need to maybe look at. But even in South Africa itself, there isn't much funding on research. That is something that needs to be brought to light, and hopefully in the future we get more funding for it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the sad truth, which is why I mentioned the South collaborations like South America. So it's, when we talk about collaboration, it doesn't have to be bilateral. It can be trilateral, multilateral, but to rely, we bring in the Europeans, because I think now with funds or with Trump and the cuts, the funding cuts to research, Europe has made a fund available. So the European Research Committee, I know I think it's Wellcome Trust. So that's the other thing that we should talk about is funding. That's important, is funding opportunities, identifying funding. So Wellcome Trust, and looking more now in this climate towards rather Europe for funding, but then we can have funding, but then still have our collaborations, our South collaboration. So it doesn't mean we need to always bring in the European universities. We can apply. It's competitive though, and it also depends on who you have on the team. So if you have a person with a strong international, South African or an African research or scientist with a strong international footprint, in research, your chances of being successful in funding applications are greater. So it's about strategic alliances as well. You really have to be strategic in who you align with.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Thank you for that tip.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and I know Bill and Melinda Gates, they also, but it's I think it's for specific, like, yeah, it's for research in Africa and then HIV related research, but for research in Africa broadly, they are making $2 billion available over, I think, no, sorry, 2 billion rand. I can't remember how much it is in dollars over the next 3 or 4 years, to fill the gap that the orange dictator has left. So I hope there aren't any Trump fans on the call.
Oh, man. No, thank you for that, Nancy.
Yeah.
All right, that's it from me, Queen.
Questions from the floor, but okay, okay, shut up.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm interested actually to find out is AI and research. I'm sure it's a discussion that I don't know, like at some point we need to have, because when it comes to, I mean, AI has sort of made our lives easy to some extent, but I know it's still very much restricted academically, and there's a lot of opposition. It's very restricted. The only university that I think have made strides in that light is the University of Cape Town, that have sort of adjusted their AI use policy. And I think, in my opinion, unfortunately, we live in an era where AI is here. We cannot get rid of it. We just need to know how to work with it. So what is what is your advice when it comes to usage of AI, when it comes to this should people just hold off from using AI until the universities or the international people sort of find policies in governance with AI, or would you, I don't know, what's your final take on when it comes to
On AI.
AI usage? Yeah.
So I know Stellenbosch University is, I need to check though, but the Faculty of Medicine has also now released, or they were working on a draft policy around AI. But more in the context of writing and publication and so on. So I just want to make sure what your answer or what your question is relating to. Is it AI in scientific writing, or using AI for
Civic rights in
treatments?
the money. That's exactly what I'm asking. Yes.
For public, yes, yeah. So actually MRC, we have but that's an internal workshop, again, the research integrity workshop, because we, they try to stay ahead of these things. A workshop on AI and research integrity. So for so I know Stellenbosch University as well, and SAMRC, if you use AI, you can, it's not prohibited, but there needs to be
Disclaimer.
sufficient acknowledgement, yes, given. So firstly, obviously you need to paraphrase, you can't copy and paste, but it's a good place to start off. And then acknowledge. So in your paper, in the publication is usually an acknowledgement section. So there you would acknowledge that certain sections of the paper, or you'd specify which sections of the paper were generated with the aid of AI, and you would reference the the AI tool. So whether it's ChatGPT, or I don't know what other, I'm a dinosaur. I know there's other tools as well. You would need to reference.
Perplexity.
Yeah.
Yes, there's
Sorry.
many other ones out there. Yeah, there's a lot of AI
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah. So chat, yeah, other, bots and so on, you need to reference it accordingly. And it also depends on the university has clear outlines for if when it comes to assignments, proposals, protocols, and the use of research. But when it comes to publication, you need to know what the journal requirements are. So certain journals are, I think it's overkill though. They require AI to be listed as a co-author. But I think that's the exception. Mostly they require the it to be listed in the acknowledgement section and then referenced accordingly. But no, the researchers I work with, they use, I think they over rely on AI. I'm worried that they're going to stop being able to think for themselves. It's like type of thought in, and then there you go. I'm all for making life easy, but yeah,
It does
we
make you
need
a bit
to,
lazy. Yeah.
and it's important to have your own voice come through. I've had someone who submitted an abstract, and one of the reviewers said, I can, because they knew, not the reviewer, one of the supervisors said, I can see this is AI generated because I know what your writing is,
Oh,
and I can't see your voice come through in this piece. So you use AI by all means, but paraphrase. Let your voice, your style come through. So be careful. Yeah, just guard against that. So that supervisor was not happy at all, because it was a copy and paste job. For a
yeah,
proposal,
no,
for a
that's
protocol, you don't do that. Yeah.
yeah. You can't copy and paste,
Yeah.
but it can help with like maybe a conceptual basis or something.
Exactly,
Build
exactly,
on
exactly. And yeah, just giving, some guidance on how to.
guidelines. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's there's going to be more development. As I said, I know the MRC is hosting, but it's an internal workshop, a whole workshop on research integrity on AI. So I'm happy to share that at some point.
So much. Thank you so much, ladies, for that conversation and everyone that participated. And I think we get most utility by having this conversation and asking
Mm,
all the questions that we wouldn't typically ask or like know where to begin with them. I think
mm,
from my side, I think we wrap up this session. And I mean, from the last part of the conversation, it does say to me that we need to have another conversation another time. And I think
mhm.
Kuchu, you highlighted the submission to journals, which I think would be a
Yes,
topic on its
that is a
own.
whole other topic.
That we will have to, it will be part three of the series. How do you
Um,
submit to journals and the process and everything? So I think I'm going to give you the opportunity, like final words. In South Africa, I mean, even for us as clinicians, research, it's like, I don't know if it's a misnomer that we have or just like a preconcept or conceived fear that we have that's not
mm,
really big thing when it comes to research. What are your final words as someone who's a research scientist with the research experience and you do this on a daily basis to sort of help us, entertain and try and delve into research? Because I mean, research is the future. We generate this information. We need it in South Africa by South African researchers in different
mhm.
contexts at the hub of research. What would be your final words to us so that we don't just do it as part of our MMate, but actually we get involved, we go deep?
Yeah,
What would be your
yeah,
final words
yeah,
to us? Yeah.
yeah. Yes. So, right. In conclusion, then, some words of wisdom. Why research? Sure. That I suppose for me, because I was, I started off with a, Bachelor of Science. I was thinking of medicine at one point, and then I was thinking of clinical, neuropsychology, and I was, all over, all over the place. But the really, it really comes from a need for knowledge and generating knowledge. For me, research, I mean, clinical work, that is, you are saving lives, that, I think you can't get a more important job or vocation than that. But for me, I think it's the as I said, it's the generation of knowledge where, and it's not always change you can see immediately, but it's where it's at the cutting edge of, um, finding new therapies, like Prof. Glenda Gray. Unfortunately, she also had to stop that study with a PEPFAR, when PEPFAR stopped the or cut the funding, but they were doing the brilliant study where they were developing a vaccine for an HIV vaccine, but where it wasn't conducted by Europeans or whoever, it was
Oh,
conducted by
wow.
us. So it's, yeah, so that was a whole consortium. No, I am lying. They had international collaborators, but they were busy with a trial for developing an HIV vaccine. Um, so it's that is the, and as I said, research isn't always world changing like that, but
Mhm.
it's genuinely about, yes, the clinical work is there with the implementation and the way we see how the changes, how the health benefits and the well-being, or the effects on well-being. But it starts with the innovation and the development. So that for me is a passion. It's the finding the new knowledge. It's the the not pie in the sky research, because there's no point doing research that's going to sit there and not be, of any use to anyone. It has to be of relevance and has to have clear benefits.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of researchers are in it for, oh, it's about the size of the grant, but ethic committees now increasingly are wanting to know, how does this translate? How does this translate into real life benefits for the people you are investigating?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is what I would leave you with.
I feel like I'm part of the club. Thank you so much. Like, it's a nightmare coming from someone who was just like, oh, when it comes to research, the anxiety just goes
It's
there.
like,
Now I just feel like, you know what? I got this. I got this. I know this. There's a recipe,
I
and
think
everything is
that's
just about ticking boxes. That's what I'm saying. We're part of the club now, and I hope not only myself but everyone that is just going to listen to this, they will feel like, you know what? This is something I can actually do. Yeah, no,
it's
thank you so much for your
doable.
time. And I think we will definitely have another session discussing other topics. And I
Mhm.
think this is how we grow as women in South Africa, as
Yes, yes, yes.
researchers. It's still Women's Month. I'm allowed to just say woman. So
Oh, yes.
as
Yeah,
women,
yeah, yeah.
future scientists, that's how we grow. We're part of the club. We will have our own society. No, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. We will have another session. And thank you so much, Nancy. I know you are very busy, and thank you for taking time out.
No,
It was such an
absolutely.
informative session. We truly, 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 truly do appreciate. Yeah.
And